you for the nice intro, Nicholas. Let me just share my screen so that I'm sure it works. Let me know if you can see it. Yeah? Okay, perfect. Great. So thanks a lot. First of all, thank you for having me. I'm a really big fan of the meetups. I didn't see all of them, but I saw a few, and I think it's a really cool idea to have this, online event in these crazy times. Welcome to everyone else as well who's joining to listen about the challenges faced by companies while they're implementing AI solutions. I will definitely introduce myself, and I'll definitely introduce Merantic's labs as well. But first of all, I'd actually like to ask you some questions. So as Nicholas said, I have this Slido integration into my slides. Let's see how it works. You should be able to join at slido.com, and the code is 31192. And my first question for you, to just get a bit of a understanding on what group we are, is which industry do you actually work in? So, okay, it's working, perfect. Happy about that. I'll give it a few seconds to see how many of you actually respond. Software is leading. Okay, oh, this is fun. I really like this integration. Okay, 13 people, maybe I'll give it a few more seconds. Okay, so it seems like the vast majority is in software actually. Then we have some services. Oh, it's jumping around a bit. Okay, I think we get the idea. Okay, I'll go to the next question. People are still responding, but just for the sake of time also. The next question is, what type of organization do you work for? Is it a startup, a smaller enterprise, corporate, or anything else? Foundation University, okay. Okay, cool. So it's quite balanced. And then my last question for you, I'll go to the next one. The last question, we had around 20 answers as well. So what is your expertise in AI actually? Are you a specialist, meaning do you work in AI? Do you have an interest maybe in your free time? Or you don't actually know that much and you're just interested and you're newbie into this topic? Okay, cool. So, okay, we have some specialists. Okay, great. So we have quite a diverse group. Very happy about that. Now that I know a bit about you, I'll also introduce myself. So as Nicholas said, my name is Johana. I work as a business development specialist at Merantic's labs. I come from Prague, Czech Republic, actually. I'm not from Germany. I'm living in Berlin, but I'm from Prague. And I've also lived in Egypt, Canada, and did a few internships all over the world. So quite international. It would be cool to also see other cities in the meetups later on. We can talk about that later. As Nicola said, I studied public policy with focus on innovation and data analytics. And I worked in different environments. I worked in a corporate, I worked in a startup in Canada actually, and after my master's degree, I worked in the European Commission's Horizon 2020 program. Maybe some of you know it. It's quite a well-known program, funding and supporting different projects in all across different sectors and industries. And I think it was mostly being at the European Commission that it made me think about how the whole ecosystem, especially in Europe, is set up. Because Europe is quite specific in that it has a really strong AI research, but it's a bit weaker in transferring this research to industry. And on top of that, there is not that much collaboration between different actors. Like startups often have the ideas, they have the drive, they have the creativity, but they lack funding and a bit more of stability, which you can find then in larger companies that actually have the money and resources, but it's a bit difficult for them to navigate through it, and sometimes they tend to also be quite skeptical. So when I was there, I was also thinking how to kind of, I was really interested in this gap, and how could I use my resources to work on these relations. And then I found out about Merantics Labs, and I thought it was a really cool place to tackle these issues. I don't know if you know about Merantics. Let me just, so Merantics, as Nicolas said, is a venture building studio, and Merantics Labs is one of the ventures within Merantics. We also have Vara, which is a healthcare company, and then Sia Search, which is an automotive company. But Merantics Labs, we position ourselves as the external machine learning department for companies. And how we work is that we basically help our clients from different industries, be it manufacturing, retail, healthcare, or any other industry really. We help them to ideate and identify different AI use cases that would bring them the highest value. And once we develop this process, once we ideate and really come up with solutions that would be useful for them, we actually develop the algorithms, we develop the solutions, and help them implement it and scale it. We have quite a cool team, I would say, of really cool engineers, scientists, and entrepreneurs. Like I said, we're based in Berlin, so if you ever want to come by, say hi, check us out, let me know. We welcome guests. And maybe one more thing about this, just I think also this is quite relevant for the topic that I'll talk about later. So we work on really diverse projects. We work mostly in computer vision, natural language processing, but also forecasting. And we've developed different solutions spanning, like I said, different industries on, for example, visual quality control, sales conversion estimation, price forecasting, or also automated inventory taking. And I think now this experience actually really allows us, this experience of guiding the client, the company through this process of an AI project, really allows us to also see, notice, and kind of tackle these challenges that they face when looking at this project, when trying to adopt AI in their company. And I think you can see these challenges come up, quite early in the beginning. Sometimes the clients are just not ready for it, but you can also see them throughout the whole process. And I think this is why I'm here to talk about these, because at Merantics Labs, we actually went through a few of these. So I'd like to share a few of these with you and hopefully discuss them afterwards as well. Before we actually get into the challenges, I'd like to take a step back and talk a bit more on a general level. So we do realize, I saw that a lot of you are interested in AI, a lot of you work in AI. So we realize that AI can actually help humans a lot. It can save us a lot of trouble. It can take over our jobs in hazardous environments, making environments safer. It can perform mundane and repetitive tasks, or it can help us when shocks hit. It would have probably been great to also have it predict shocks such as Corona, but then we wouldn't have been having this event. So, there's always something. But sorry, I got a bit stuck here. Just give me a second. Okay, good. Sorry, my slides got a bit lost. So why, the question is, why are we really seeking, why are we seeking these solutions? Why do we want to implement AI? I really think it has a lot to do with the human nature, where as humans, we have always, pushed ourselves one step higher in the pursuit of greatness. We want more power, we want more influence, we want more change. And this is both on a personal, but also on societal level. If we look at history, for example, our aspiration to build, something so new and so visionary as AI is definitely not the first time we're going through the process of scaling to new heights. And I have an example here, but first let me ask you a maybe seemingly a random question. How many flights per year do you usually take? And now let's exclude Corona times. If you can go back to Slido. Yeah, that's what I thought. I should have given the numbers way higher. Okay, 1 to 10, 20 plus. Okay. And we have what? We have 24 responses out of these. Okay, 4% actually do not take any flights. So it's quite obvious that most of us fly, maybe not every week, unless you're a consultant, of course. But a lot of us do fly, take a lot of flights. But it's, of course, not always been that way, right? The idea of flying has been in people's minds since antiquity. I'm sure you all know the myth of Icarus, who flew too close to the sun, which melted the wax on his wings, and then he fell, and I believe he did die. And this idea of people flying has been there forever. And you would think that such a myth, such a story would maybe deter people from attempting to fly ever again. But like I said before, that's not really in our nature. We really try to strive for more and better. And even after the story, of course, there have been many, many different attempts to learn how to fly or to kind of conquer flying. This picture that you see is actually a picture of the so-called flying monk. It takes us back to medieval England, where people started building these large, tall cathedrals. And for most of people, the cathedrals inspired respect, maybe a bit of fear of God. But for some, like this nice man here, it inspired curiosity, and he attempted to fly from a cathedral tower. So he basically, why I'm mentioning him, because he's the first person who has recorded his attempt, and of which we actually have some information. When he jumped, he actually flew. He flew for around 200 meters, but as he was landing, he fell and broke both his legs, and unfortunately couldn't really walk afterwards. And while his story does not really have a happy ending, the story of his attempt, the documentation, helped to teach later aviators about problems which particularly affect aviation, such as drag, lift, or thrust. And some of the people who followed the flying monk, also constructed all sorts of funny-looking flying devices, but they learned from his mistakes. They learned from his constructions, and the innovation kind of developed over time. The question is now, were these people crazy or were they geniuses? It really depends, right? It really depends on how we look at it. Probably at the time they would be called lunatics. But now when we look at them, we would probably call them visionaries or innovators.
It depends in what century, in which century you live.
Exactly.
On that, it depends.
Exactly.
You must also look now in this pandemic. Look in which century you live, and then look to South America. Look to Brazil, and then look here to Europe, and then look to Donald Trump. Sorry. Okay.
Definitely depends on the timing.
Only one or two words. What he done before Donald Trump. There's a good president. I think it's Barack Obama. He good political. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Just to go back quickly to this flying story. After all these attempts, it took centuries of trial and error, a lot of injuries, a lot of thinking by hundreds, thousands of people that step by step led to this technological advancement. And in the end, it led to a point where a family called the Wright family, they're usually known by the name Wright brothers, but they also had a sister who was very much involved, had the idea to commercialize flying. So they basically started an aviation company and said, okay, we're gonna make money out of this. We're gonna make flying more accessible. And just like that, flying that was initially for lunatics kind of became a thing of the public. And since then, over the past 100 years, I mean, you know how the progress has gone. We've made passenger planes that carry hundreds of people. We've broken the sound barrier. We have unmanned flying vehicles, and we've flown people to space. So I think that's quite cool to just see how quickly the progress can go. And you might be wondering, what's the point here? Well, the point is, just a second. The point is that we as humans often start with an idea. You know, we start with an idea, we start with an ambition, if you wish. And when there is the ambition by a few pioneers, there's also a lot of skepticism, there's a lot of inertia, there's quite a bit of mockery. Can be quite a bit of mockery. And it's especially because the pioneers build on trial and error, and they also go through many failed attempts. But once certain factors align, and this can be many things, but for example, technological advancement, a smart and entrepreneurial person, a person who can invest money or resources into an idea, once all these things align, a breaking point comes. And after this breaking point, a larger portion of the society actually becomes interested in the innovation. And suddenly the innovators are not fools anymore, but like I said, they become visionaries. And the idea they once had spent endless hours on actually becomes a commodity. And just like that, AI also had its visionaries, you know, trials and errors, failed attempts, and also quite a good portion of mockery. It's been talked about as an idea for a really long time. If you search also through mythology, different mythologies, you can kind of see these artificial beings. You know, it's been in philosophy, 17th century philosophy, in literature, in arts, and books. I chose this book because I don't know if you know RUR, but it's actually written by Czech author and Karel Čapek, and he's the first one who ever used the name, the word robot. So I just want to propagate my culture a little bit, a little bit of self-propagation. Yeah, so the idea has been there for a long time. And then there are first machines, there are first computers, first simple robots doing tasks for us. We developed, you know, semiconductors, CPUs, GPUs, and we also progressed in mathematics and physics quite a lot. And looking at AI now, we have actually reached the breaking point. We have the infrastructure, we have the, you know, with IoT and 5G promising even higher interconnectedness. We have enormous amount of data that is waiting to be analyzed. We have enough knowledge to develop powerful algorithms. And you can see this progress. You know, there are new companies, there are small startups. You can also see it in your daily lives. I don't know, any really subscriptions you have, I don't know, Netflix, Facebook, all these companies, they actually are using some kind of machine learning algorithms. But let me give you a question. How many AI projects do you, there we go. How many AI projects do you think fail in companies? And now think globally and think just also old school companies, not new startups. Now the results are not supposed to be showing at the moment. They will be showing. I don't want to influence your answers. Let's wait. Okay, I think that's it. So now let's see if this slide works. No? Sorry. Oh, there we go. Okay, 85%. Okay, great. You're right. It is actually 85%. This is from a report done by Bacteria Technologies, which is a market research agency. So we are past the breaking point. So why is it so difficult for companies to reach the potential of AI? Why is it so difficult for them to actually implement these solutions? And I think now here I can offer our experience from Merantix Labs, where we work with those companies. We very often work with companies that are either SMEs or some more old school organizations. Sorry. But before we go into what the challenges actually are, before we go into what the challenges actually are, let's look into where and when the challenges actually happen. So if you are a large company, the challenges you will face with AI are not really evenly distributed. And just like with flying, most of the issues appear during takeoff and landing. Most people are scared of takeoff and landing. Most mistakes by pilots are done during takeoff and landing, and most accidents actually happen during takeoff and landing. And when you're in the air, when you're flying, you don't really realize that you're flying. You're just kind of on the plane, unless there are turbulences, of course, that can also happen. And just like that, it's most difficult for companies to start with AI projects, to really get the project going, to get a deep dive into the topic. And then it's also difficult for them to land, to scale the project, to actually bring it into production. Yeah. And let's actually look into some specific challenges that we've come across during our projects. I believe that the main challenges occur on 3 different levels. The levels are people, strategy, and then data and algorithms. Let's first go into the people section. So challenge level number 1 is that the lack of AI understanding and AI talent prevents success in AI projects. And what I mean by this is that, first of all, AI implementation really requires the management to have a deeper understanding of current AI technologies, their possibilities, their limitations. And in order to develop a successful AI solutions, you actually need both the technical knowledge and the business understanding. And unfortunately, it's very often one or the other, where the CEOs and managers kind of lack the technical know-how, while many of the engineers aren't that interested in how the models that they develop can or will be used in real life. At the same time, there is still a bit of misconception about AI out there. What is it? What can it do for me? What do I need to start? How do I take care of it? And because of that, a lot of people are very skeptical. Sorry, I'm still in the office and coming in. And another point here is that even though the speed in which humans are working, it's rapidly increasing. There are so many more tasks each person has to do nowadays. And I don't know how about you, but I could use the help of some automation with some of my tasks. If you don't, then maybe let me know. You can teach me your ways. But the issue is that very often management or companies don't really want machines. They just want faster humans. There is a really nice quote by Henry Ford, the founder of Ford Motor Company. And it goes, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. And I think this fits really nicely. You know, if some companies have to really evaluate, do they want faster horses or do they want cars? And if they want the cars, if they want the technology, they really have to learn about it. So as you can see, culture and openness to new technologies is really crucial and should actually come from the management level. And it's also not only the openness, but some sort of fast-paced process. If your company starts with one AI project and takes several years to implement it, it might already be obsolete. The second challenge under people, of course, is talent. I'm sure you've read or discussed this topic before. But even if a company does choose to go for the innovative part and really, tries to adapt the culture, even if they learn about AI, there are still some other barriers. And one of these is the lack of talent. So until very recently, as we discussed before, AI has been something mostly talked about by writers, and worked on only by extremely specialized scientists in universities. There weren't enough use cases so that it would be rolled out to the regular world. There was no mass market application. And what does that mean? Well, it means that not many organizations were putting money into skills development and in this domain, and also not that many universities included these skills, be it in a management program or in a more technology-oriented program. They didn't include skills in the curriculum. And even though now this topic is very popular, I mean, if you want to apply for an AI program, you might even have difficulties getting a place because they're so popular right now. The supply of qualified engineers has still not really caught up to the demand. And then if you do find the qualified engineers, it's very difficult to attract them unless you're Facebook, Google, or a really cool startup in Berlin. And this is especially true for small and medium enterprises, for example, due to their limited budget, but also sometimes it can be due to location. All this talent is excited to go to a big city, but a lot of these companies are actually spread around countries. So what to do about this? Well, of course, this is something companies should invest in. They should invest in it in the long run. They should invest in an educational plan, into hiring engineers, but also business people with the understanding. But it's costly and it takes time. You need to train the people, you need to develop their skills, and you need to be attractive as an employer, which of course is getting more and more difficult these days. So another option also is, at least at the beginning, when you're just venturing into AI, it's kind of like, again, a little bit of the airplane analogy. Think about airlines, how many of them own their airplanes? I won't do a Slido question for this because I'm sure you all probably will answer that it's very few, because majority of airlines are leasing their airplanes. And just like that, with your company, you can start small. You can start small and develop a project with a partner or a vendor. There are many, many different partners who can help you with this. And once you get in the process, they can also educate you. They can develop your own capabilities. And along with this, you don't get really stuck in the past, and you also have time to develop your own AI pipeline. So that would be for the people bucket. Now the next challenge level that we've recognized, that we've seen a lot, is on the strategic level. And what I mean by this is there's the lack of clear strategy and goals, and strong use cases in AI create unnecessary tensions and inefficient settings. So what I mean by this is that it very often happens that companies jump on the AI bandwagon with too much optimism and not enough clear strategy. So after all, I mean, AI has become kind of a buzzword, everyone's talking about it, everyone wants it, everyone wants to be AI enabled, everyone wants to be innovative. But especially when the management is not really aware of what all AI can do, there will be a lack of strategic approach. And to be honest, AI implementation, we see that over and over again, really needs a strategic approach. It needs some objectives. It needs setting objectives for your future, for the projects. And it also needs identifying KPIs and tracking of your results. Otherwise, if you don't have these, you won't really be able to assess the result brought by AI and compare these results with your assumptions, with your plans, and you can't really measure how successful you are or if you failed, for that matter. Yeah, so strategy is one point that is quite often lacking. And the second point that I also wanted to touch upon is having a strong use case. So I think this is one of the issues that we see most often when we cooperate also with companies. They might have a lot of ideas, a lot of ideas for different projects, but because there is not enough technical knowledge or not enough knowledge about how AI projects could actually benefit them, it's difficult for them to imagine what can work, what has the business value. And yeah, I think it's really important to focus on this. This can be, through different workshops or going to different conferences, talking to people, really making some analysis of what you can do. But it's definitely something that needs to be tackled. And just a bit of water. And then the last bucket for the challenges that we see, I mean, this one I'm sure you're all also very much aware of, data and algorithms. So of course, everybody knows that the outcome of an algorithm is only as good as the data that are fed into it. But I think there are also other more global issues, ethical issues for that. Yeah. So I'd like to discuss both a little bit. Let's first focus on the data itself, and then I'll move a bit to the higher kind of overarching level. So data. As I said, the quality of the system of any kind of solution that clients want to implement heavily relies on the data that's fed into it. And AI systems, they require training data sets, and the algorithms learn from available information, in a way similar to humans, but kind of they need more data than humans do. This is often not possible for companies. They either don't have enough data or they don't have the data that they need. So I think how to kind of approach this problem is that first companies need to really figure out what data they have and compare it to what the model that they're using requires. So of course, for that, again, you need to have that strategy in mind a little bit, knowing what model you have. Yeah, so when you know what data you need and what data you have, you'll see what you're missing. And then you can get the missing parts. And this can be either from publicly available information, or you can get the data from some other place that's publicly available. Or if the data is difficult to obtain, such as clinical data, you can turn to synthetic data. You can create it yourself. But another option is to also cooperate, make alliances with other companies. Maybe they can be companies from different industry, but working on the same problem. So that when you can share data, you don't actually compete, you're not sharing it with a competitor, but you're sharing it with someone who is working on the same problem, just from a different angle. So that's definitely something that's not being done enough, especially in Europe, because I think we're very still worried about our data privacy, but it's definitely also one of the solutions. And then that's about collecting data. And then the last point I have here is about data labeling, because very often we see that companies don't actually realize how much time and effort has to go in this at the beginning before the model gets deployed. So this is just something that should be talked about and that companies should be aware of. And now that was more on the kind of logistical side of data, and now onto the other part, which I personally find very interesting, and that's explainability. So, you know, explainability usually is not a big issue when things go the way we want. You know, we don't really necessarily know what exactly happens in some of these algorithms. But if they give us the results that we want, and if they give us the results that we're comfortable with, then we wouldn't really care that much. But the issue starts when, like, imagine what if an algorithm recommends to you something that's against your opinion or against your values, or you know, against your culture, company culture, for example. What do you do then? I suppose you would want to understand, right, why the model suggested what it suggested. And at the moment, at least, this is not really fully possible yet. Some of the, what I mean by this is that some of the deep learning models, they kind of come with their own little black box. Just like the black boxes in flights, you know, when a flight crashes, we go to the black box for answers, but we can't always identify what led to the accident, and it can take years to make a conclusion, and sometimes you don't even find out what was the issue. And just like that, the black boxes of deep learning algorithms are very difficult to understand. There are some initiatives to increase the transparency of these models, but we're not at the level where we would actually be able to say what's happening inside. So are there any other ways that we could kind of increase our trust in them? There are. We really need to focus our energies on strong ethics and diversity frameworks. And maybe you're wondering how this relates to data. It actually relates a lot, because while AI is not conscious, right, it learns from the data that's fed to it, like we mentioned before. And the data is usually collected by people, or it's collected in certain, it can be collected in certain groups, certain areas. And of course, we all have biases. You know, no one is ever representative of the entire population. But that is exactly why it's extremely important to have people from different backgrounds working on AI algorithms, but also to be aware of how your data is collected. You know, is it coming, maybe you're doing some kind of market analytics, maybe you're working on market analytics algorithm, and then you're looking at data from an online discussion. Like, which online discussion is it? Is there a prevalence of certain opinion? Is the discussion, are the people in the discussion of certain political alignment? You know, so this is really important to keep in mind. Another thing with the explainability and kind of ethics, diversity issues is cultural differences might be very tricky to address. So, of course, I do not have an answer on this. It's just something that when working on AI projects, it's not that companies have to come up with a global ethics framework, but it's definitely something that's extremely important to consider. So those were the main issues. Now, what does that mean for companies? What can they do to overcome these issues, or at least to tackle these issues, if not overcome them fully? There are many steps, there are many different things, of course, people can do, but I think the main points go to these four, and they are educate, experiment, invest, and persist. What do I mean by that? Just a quick thing here. So the idea, sorry, not yet. The idea is that we are on the curve of innovation, and more companies are joining, and the progress will be fast. You know, we can already see it. We can already predict some of the things. We might be going to the moon with AI. So what's really important is, first, course, to, like I said, to educate. So you basically, as a company, need to create a continuous learning environment for your employees, for yourself, I mean, now for the management level, for the employee level, create some kind of pathway, go to different conferences, send your employees to conferences, participate in different workshops, inspire new ideas within the company, but also let ideas come from the outside, you know, learn from others, cooperate, and most importantly, keep up to date. Experiment. Don't be scared to try different projects. Keep the innovation funnel busy. You know, keep the projects, keep the use cases going. Build partnerships, like I said, to share data, to share expertise, and to share knowledge. Learn from others. You also need to invest, and I think this one, of course, it's quite obvious, but you need to invest in many things. You need to invest in talent, in education, in infrastructure, and most importantly, start investing now, because yesterday was already too late. And then the last one, but not least, is to persist. So just like with the people who tried to fly and jump off different buildings, you know, you learn, you have to keep on going, you have to try different projects. You're probably gonna fail at some point a little bit, but you're gonna learn from that and you're gonna build on that experience. Learn from your failures, learn from the failures of others, and improve on your successes. So that's kind of the advice he would give to the challenges that we see very often. And I think just a little bit of food for thought. What can we learn? You know, what does the future hold? Because, like I said, this innovation curve is really exponential. And if we also look at, for example, the flying industry, as I mentioned before, it's very likely that AI will be even more democratized. You know, so the question is, to what extent will AI actually impact our lives? What all will we use it for? Just like flying has enabled different business models, you know, it created mass tourism, it completely changed logistics and supply chain. We have to think about, how will AI impact this? What new business models will AI bring? These are some of the questions, you know, also, for example, focusing on some of the negatives that can come with AI. Flying has not only increased connectivity, but it also comes with downsides, such as environmental impact. And then we also have to, when thinking about the future, think about what all negatives do we focus on with AI, what should we keep in mind? And last but not least, a lot of planes are now on autopilot. So what all in AI will also be on autopilot, maybe all of it. I certainly hope not, because a lot of us, like I said, work in software or AI, so that would mean that we won't have much of work. But yeah, just a few questions that we can also discuss later during our discussion.